Okay, I think it's just about top of the hour here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have Monica on the back end up at SERC working on the webinar for us, keeping things going. Monica, do you want to make sure that the webinar is being recorded, please?
You're good.
Thank you. That's great.
Thanks.
All right. Well, welcome to today's webinar. You can see on this first slide that there's a little illustration in the middle of the slide that shows you exactly where all of the tools are in Zoom. Those will be found by hovering your cursor down at the bottom of your screen. So take a quick look at that. Make sure you know how to get to the chat box. Chat box is very important here. Make sure you know how to get to the chat box, please. I'm going to move ahead to the next slide, Steve. So as I said before, this webinar is being recorded. I'm Aida Awad. I'm past president of NAGT. The webinar series is also sponsored by Ed Robeck at the American Geosciences Institute and Carla McAuliffe at NESTA, National Earth Science Teachers Association. And today we have Monica Bruckner working behind the scenes for us at SERC. So thanks for joining us today, Monica. Let me go to the next slide. Our webinar today is being presented by Steve Kerlin from the Stroud Water Research Center, and he'll have about 40 to 45 minutes to present his information and take us through some of the tool, which should be very interesting for all of us to engage in going through that tool with him. And during the course of the webinar, if you have questions, please type those questions into the chat box. And you can access that chat box by hovering your cursor over the bottom of your screen. You should see a toolbar there. So throughout the course of the webinar, please put your questions into the chat box. Otherwise, everyone's mic should be muted. And then we'll have time at the end of the webinar for some discussion and Q&A. We'll also be giving you a link to the post-webinar survey at that time. Can you please advance the slides, Steve? Upcoming webinars, we have a double header in May. 2 webinars in May. May 9th with USGS, webinar very timely entitled Down the Great Unknown. It should be an excellent webinar. And then May 23rd, Globe will be telling us about their new NGSS aligned globe weather. So please watch your inboxes in the next day or so. Registration information will be coming to you. So watch for those and jump in on those 2 webinars upcoming.
Aida,
yes,
there's a lot of background noise. I think, can you mute everyone?
Okay. Seems to have disappeared. Great. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I'd like to introduce at this time our presenter for today, Steve Kerlin, who will be telling us about WikiWatershed Toolkit and the next generation science standards. All yours, Steve. Please take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and glad to share a toolkit of resources. We'll highlight one of them, but I'm actually going to quickly show you 6 different tools in the WikiWatershed Toolkit, and then we'll dive into a little bit of one of them what we probably think of as the flagship tool within the toolkit, which is called Model My Watershed. And we have lots of the resources, and especially Model My Watershed has already been aligned to NGSS standards, and have gone through multiple years of pilot study with the curriculum in lots of different states and teachers across the country. So I'll be able to show you lots of those different things. Very quick and introduce myself. I think I'll probably do on the next slide. Yeah, and I'm going to turn my video off at this time so you don't have to see my face the whole time. Save a little bandwidth also. And you still should be seeing this screen though. Great. So introduce myself to start with. Originally, out of undergrad, I was a teacher, and I taught in public schools in Pennsylvania for 7 years. Earth and space science and general science, mostly 8th and 9th grade. And then back to grad school, did the MS and PhD thing in science education and environmental education. And then I was a professor for 6.5 years, both in Kentucky and Wisconsin. And 3 years, a little over 3 years ago, I ended up back in Pennsylvania It was time to come back when my first son was on the way, and to be closer to some family, and found this place, the Stroud Water Research Center, that does lots of amazing things and allows us to be very innovative and with the different things that we create and all the programs that we run. We say we teach K to gray here in our education program, so anyone from really young to we even have retirement communities that come for programs or we go to them. And we do a lot of educator professional development and citizen science programs also. I listed Dave Arscott on this slide. There was an option, possibility that he was going to be able to join us today, but he can't. He's our executive director. But also just to acknowledge that probably he and I are the two lead people from the Stroud Center. Many other people are involved that have been kind of shepherding this WikiWatershed toolkit of resources. And some of these slides are from Dave's presentation, other prior presentations. Some are ones from mine, and some are new that we've been sharing these different resources over the years. So let's see. What do we do at the Stroud Water Research Center? We have 3 departments. We have freshwater research, environmental education, and watershed restoration. So I'm the director of the environmental education department. And the goal of our department is, in short, is to interpret what the scientists and the restoration staff are doing and communicate that in education and outreach programs. So that's the fun of what we're doing in restoration with private landowners in this area, but also across the country. And then in freshwater research, we have 6 different lab groups, all led by PhD level scientists, except for right now we don't have a fisheries lead scientist. We still have a fisheries lab. And they're investigating things like entomology, macroinvertebrates in the water to assess stream health, water chemistry, of course, fluvial geomorphology, biogeochemistry, straightforward chemistry, microbiology, all of those fun things. So we have a big lab facility here where we do most of the work. You can think of us as a biological field station on steroids. We're an independent, nonprofit, non-advocacy field station on steroids, bigger than most university field stations. We've been around for 52 years, and we have about 50 full-time employees, and basically operate as a little university. So it's a really fun place to be, but we are an independent nonprofit. We are based here in Avondale, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes west of Philadelphia. So I know there's some East Coast people on the call, and there's some people from farther west also. So the picture at the top is the old half of our building, and the picture on the bottom right is the new half of our building. That is a LEED Platinum certified building, which is really fun, and we use it as a teaching tool also. And then the picture on the bottom left is the field station in Costa Rica that we manage. So in addition to studying freshwater here in Pennsylvania and other places around the world, we also manage a tropical field station on the side of a volcano you see there in Costa Rica. So that's fun, and well, kind of a side note, hopefully in the near future, I'll be able to get a grant or two, and we'll have some educator workshops in Costa Rica. And people can come down and be part of that and offer those things for grad credits, and when we end up doing that also. So we're based in these 2 locations, mostly in Pennsylvania, but our scientists have actually worked on all 7 continents, and we focus on fresh water. But we also really like the tech kind of tools. And we've grouped them all into what we call WikiWatershed Toolkit. And here's some of the other team members, some of the leading team members, but there's probably 50 or 60 or more people that have been involved over the years. And some of the lead organizations that partner with us really is a collaborative effort, but we do host the WikiWatershed platform and do most of the maintenance and updates and things on it. Except for Model My Watershed, which is, like I said, the flagship tool, the modeling tool that I'll show you. It's actually not on our servers. It's on the Amazon cloud servers. So it is super fast. pretty much as fast as whatever your local Wi-Fi is. It's faster than that. So the limit is usually what your local Wi-Fi speed is. Ooh, I see some questions coming in. Good, we'll try to cover most of those near the end. But do keep those questions coming. If there's something that's along the way I might be able to catch quickly, do that. The first question there, educational activities using a LEED Platinum building, or is it a general tour? We do both. We do general tours, and a lot of businesses want to learn about the LEED Platinum facility because they're thinking about doing similar things. But we also have very specific programs that include it. And it's not just a tour. We teach about rain gardens and wastewater wetland treatment facilities and verma composting toilets, and rainwater catchments are embedded into some of our lessons. And there's a sustainability Boy Scout merit badge that we teach also, and we use it. Okay, other acknowledgements. This slide, as I've been talking, we got to acknowledge funders and very generous funders. The top two agencies have been the biggest funders. The William Penn Foundation has a big initiative here in the Delaware River Basin and has been pumping millions of dollars into many organizations around this area. And we're halfway through a 10-year project that they're choosing to fund to improve the Delaware River Basin. And these resources that I'll show you, many of them have benefited from that funding, in addition to about 65 other organization partners. And then NSF has been our other biggest partner. We've had, there's two of those listed there. The first one, the DRK-12, is a current grant that we have that's expiring soon. We actually had two past grants, so the farther one in the past for the concept stage isn't listed there. And we just found out last week that we got awarded another NSF grant, an iTest grant that is called WATERS. It's an acronym. And we are going to be starting to recruit teachers, a small cohort for next school year, to implement a new curriculum. And part of that will be using these resources that I'll show you. Pilot curriculum to teacher training and support all throughout later in summer and all throughout the school year, and then implementation next spring. And in the following school year, we'll have a much larger cohort of teachers. Some will be based in California, some in Pennsylvania and surrounding states. And I think we're initially looking for some up and around Massachusetts also, but we'll expand in that other year. So if you're interested, potentially after you see some of the things that I'll show you, let me know. Get in contact with me. Like I said, it's just a small group of teachers. The first year, only 9 teachers across the country. But then the second year, it's going to greatly expand to many more teachers. And we've had about 80 teachers involved in our, 50, 60 teachers, sorry, involved in our current project over the last 4 years. So we definitely reach out across the country and involve teachers. So what is WikiWatershed? It's this toolkit of resources. These are scientifically graded resources that educators end up using because we have now what is a 4th NSF grant from the Education Directorate to be able to build the functionality so that teachers and non-formal educators can use it. But it's also used by scientists, by other researchers, by conservation organizations, used by citizen scientists. It's used by municipal decision makers like your local zoning boards and your planning commissions, whoever is in charge in your local area. It's different in different states. So, people making decisions about, we're going to allow that farm to be rezoned for a housing development. Some of these tools, especially Model My Watershed that I'll show you, is one of those tools that they can use. And in Pennsylvania, Model My Watershed will very soon be one of the recommended tools by our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that can be used in permitting applications for people to make those kind of changes. So a highly scientific tools based on real science, some not even just based on it, but is the real science and the real methods that scientists use and educators and students can use it, and citizen science can use it too. So let's take a look at, there are currently 6 tools in the toolkit that I'm going to very quickly show you today in the next half hour or less, and then answer some questions or maybe give it a little time to play. If you do see in the chat window, if you scroll way up to the top of it, beginning of it, I posted the website is just WikiWatershed.org. So if you have multiple screens or want to toggle back and forth between different screens, you can follow the PowerPoint that I'm showing you with screenshots, but you can also just play around on WikiWatershed.org as I'm going through the resources for you. So Model My Watershed, that's the flagship modeling tool. I'll show you that. Monitor My Watershed uses the same platform, but it's a way that you can discover other people's data from a study area that you delineate. And you can get some of your own data up into this GIS platform. Runoff Simulation is a little animated tool, which I'll show you next slide actually. EnviroDIY is a community, open community, global community of people who are investigating and doing things, do-it-yourself community on environmental science and environmental monitoring. And we have a stream sensor that we've developed that's kind of the heart of that conversations on that community. The LeafPack network is an international network, been around for 20 or so years. I'll show you a little bit about that. And it's a way to do bioassessments of streams. And then I'll show you a mobile app that works not on your desktop computer, but mobile apps work on your smartphones and your tablets and iPads. We'll show you that also. So the first one is this runoff simulation. This is kind of a cartoony simulation, but it has the same information on it that is in the site storm model, which is a 24-hour rain event model that's in the full-scale Model My Watershed GIS, which I'll show you a little bit later. So we typically use this simulation with either younger students or with middle and high school students as a scaffolding lesson before they launch into the full-scale GIS. And so this, again, is a simulation of the 24-hour storm event. You can change the amount of rain within a 24-hour period. You can change the type of land cover in this block of land, and you can change the underlying hydrologic soil group. And you can then see how that amount of rain proportions itself, depending on those different variables, to evapotranspiration, infiltration, and runoff. And all throughout this and the full-scale modeling GIS, your basic goal or your student's goal is to minimize runoff and promote infiltration. So you're talking about things like pervious and impervious surfaces, those types of things. We want to note at this time that the land cover options that are shown are also included in the full-scale GIS. They match right up. And those are not ours. We didn't make those up. Those are the USGS's land cover designation types. And when we get a little farther along also, you'll see that not only it's their land cover that they use, types that they use, it's their color codes. It's exactly, it's from their database. So this is real data that the teachers and students can use. Same thing with hydrologic soil groups. We didn't make those up. Those are from the USDA. And those are their 4 major hydrologic soil groups. And they're punched right into the scientific algorithms that are behind the scenes. And those algorithms like the TR55 runoff model from USGS and other ones, or in USDA, other ones that are working behind the scenes when you do modeling are the same models that scientists and other researchers use, as students will be using those also. Let's jump to a different resource, the water quality mobile app. So this one, like I said, is not for your desktop computer. It's a completely different programming language. This is a mobile app, so it works on your smartphones and your tablets and iPads, things like that. It's called Water Quality. When you search for it on the internet or in the iTunes store or Android Google Play store, you'll notice that it doesn't have a space in between. The character limit is we were at the character limit, so it's water quality, all one word. This has a small cost to it. It's $5, just because we used to have grants that made it free, but we don't have grants to cover ongoing cost. It's on version 8 now. We have to do an update almost every year, sometimes twice a year, because operating systems change. And we specifically made this for education and citizen science. So we don't have any funding from any pop-ups or advertisements. We don't want any of that, those distractions on a student's phone or on a classroom iPads or things like that. So there are some ongoing costs we've got to cover. So it's a couple bucks. So it's a data collection tool and a learning tool, and it has 3 sections to it. I'll show you those sections. The first section is your site profile section, where you record information about your stream study site, where it's located, some pictures, water level, the weather in the past 48 hours, things like that. I will note with this, once you download the app works. You don't have to be online on cell service or Wi-Fi, except for 2 things. If you wanted to find your latitude and longitude, you'd have to be connected somehow, and when you want to export your data. But you can do that when you get back to school on your Wi-Fi. Everything else is all there. You don't have to be on the internet or anything. It's all downloaded. The next section is chemical and physical measurements. And this section has just about every chemical and physical measurement you'd ever make when you do a stream study. And the example shown here is dissolved oxygen. And each one of them, importantly, has a learning pop-up. And that basically helps the students and you as a teacher make sense of what the numbers mean. So often we do stream studies, and in this example, dissolved oxygen, maybe if we're working with middle or high school students, we do that Winkler titration to get the dissolved oxygen number in milligrams per liter, and say they get 7 milligrams per liter. That's great. They're at the stream, they did a Winkler titration, and they get a number. And what did they learn? They learned to follow directions to get a number. What does 7 milligrams per liter mean about the health of the stream? So each one of these has a learning pop-up. Each parameter has a learning pop-up that helps you make sense, you and the students make sense of what that number means for that chemical and physical measurement, about what it means about the health of the stream. And they all have different little scales and things like that. On the left here is one for pH. What can live at different pH levels in a stream? What types of fish and macroinvertebrates and other things can live at different pH levels. And then the next section is the macroinvertebrate digital field guide and pollution tolerance index. So you can use it as a field guide. There's pop-ups for each of the basic, mostly at order level, groups of macroinvertebrates that you would collect and are routinely collected across the country when you do a bioassessment of the stream using benthic macroinvertebrates. And then there's a calculation, which is a pollution tolerance index based on the presence or absence of these different taxa of macroinvertebrates. And they have a different rating system depending on how sensitive or tolerant they are to pollutants in the water. Somebody asked, for the mobile app, how many devices will the download cost cover? If you download this app on Apple devices, Apple's licensing agreement is that you can use the same Apple ID on 10 mobile devices. So if your IT people don't know this at your school, tell them that they don't have to download and pay for apps for every single iPad that you have at school. They should be syncing 10 iPads on the same Apple ID at a time. And then if you have more than 10, you can do it in sets of 10. So you only have to pay one for every 10 devices that you have, and you just use the same Apple ID. And it populates all of your apps. Like there's great apps out there by other organizations, Audubon and things like that too. There's Leaf Snap, and is a great app for forestry. I do not know off the top of my head what the Android licensing agreements are. So if you have like a Samsung Galaxy 3 or something like that, I don't know what the Android ones are, but this app is available on Android also. All right, let's switch to another resource. Ooh, I've got to go faster. EnviroDIY stream sensors. So that's that community, worldwide community that you can be part of, join, free, and talk to other people. This is becoming very popular in schools now with the maker spaces that a lot of schools are getting, or STEM classes. And the sensor, the stream sensor that I mentioned, that's part of it that we've created. It looks something like this. Our in-house electrical engineer created the circuit board. It's on an Arduino circuit board. So if some of you are makerspace people, you know what Arduino is, the circuit board platform. And then we don't make any sensors or anything like that. The Campbell makes those, or Decagon makes those. But we have lots of schools and watershed associations that we're working with through the Citizen Science Grant. And they have these sensor stations in their stream that look like this. And they cost about $2,500, but that's way cheaper than a $10,000 USGS stream gauging station if they're a full-scale one with lots of different sensors. There's an example one there. And by default, all of your information gets beamed to the internet at 5-minute intervals by default. You can set it to whatever you want. And here's an example of data on the internet that you have on your profile section for your stream sensor station. This one happens to be water depth and turbidity. And you can look at other people's data too. You can do that now. You don't even have to have your own sensor station. You can look at that through Monitor My Watershed, which I'm going to get to. A different resource is the LeafPack network. This one's been around for a while. The Lamont company distributes all the materials. And the idea is, and scientists have been doing this method has been around for over 60 years. You place a bag of leaves and what looks like an onion bag into your stream, use local leaves, or you can create experiments by putting different things, maybe habitat or food sources, into your stream. Leave it there for a couple weeks for the macroinvertebrates to populate and begin eating it, the leaves or the algae that is growing on it. And then you can sort through it and see what kind of macroinvertebrates you find, and you can upload that to the internet too. And that's all going to be geolocated within the Model My Watershed GIS platform also. So we're tying all of these different resources together. So let's get to, here we go, the main platform, the flagship resource I want to show you, which is called Model My Watershed. And who's using it? I already covered that a little bit. The largest percent of people lately that have been using this from a survey last year have been educators. And that's probably because of the NSF grants that we've had and the large numbers of teachers and students that have been using it. The student number is low on this chart because we purposely weren't trying to get students to answer this survey, but because of youth protection guidelines and things, but some of them did on their own that weren't part of the program. So the student number is actually much larger. But you can see all the other professionals that are using it also. People all across the country are using it, but a lot more people here in the East Coast because of the additional funding by the William Penn Foundation. So what can you do? Anywhere in the lower 48 states, you can get all of this data to analyze. Stream data, which are the blue lines, air temperature, precipitation, elevation data, slope data. You can get hydrologic soils from the USDA, and you can get those land cover types from the USGS. In programming terms, what we've done is what a typical GIS does is you've mashed up a bunch of different data layers, and we've also now done a mashup of other resources that are tied into this platform. And there are many, many more things. This is a short list of data that you can view and analyze. Right now, this is zoomed way out to the continental United States. You'll see as we go to other pages that you can zoom way in and get really high detail. So what can you do with this GIS platform? You can analyze all kinds of data for your selected areas. You can create very small selected areas if you like, or entire watersheds of different sizes. And a lot of teachers like to outline their school property, and that becomes their study area. But you can also use a small watershed that your school property is part of. That's probably the next most popular thing to do. You can share your projects. This is completely free on the internet for you to use. Model My Watershed is a free resource. You don't have to take you don't have to pay for a desktop version of a GIS that costs hundreds of dollars. And you don't have to take multiple semesters of courses to become a GIS specialist to be able to use it. If you can use Google Earth, you can use Model My Watershed. There are two types of models that you can use. One is that 24-hour storm model, which is that site storm model package. That's the same thing as that little simulation I showed you before, but now it's in this full-scale GIS platform. There's also a watershed multi-year model, which I'll only briefly show you today. That one's definitely a little more advanced. It analyzes 30 years of data and gives you outputs for a calendar year of predictions with different scenarios that you create on the landscape. So some other things that were recently added, different discovery tools, some more details, ways to visualize, base flow measurements. For time's sake, I'm going to skip that. So here we go. Here's some examples. And this example right here shows how Model My Watershed is actually embedded into a different curriculum platform, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can define your study areas lots of different ways. The most simplest way is to create a 1 square kilometer around a certain point. So you could drop a point on your school building and it will create a 1 square kilometer around it. That can be your study area. You can outline your school property, like I said before, that can be your study area. You can delineate a watershed that your school is part of. You can choose larger watersheds and sub-watersheds of different sizes, and that can be your study area. Really personal and very place-based type of education, place-based and inquiry-based type of education. So this zoomed way back out again. I think I covered most of this. Yep, this is the site storm model description. Let me skip it for time. Here's an example that a teacher in our current cohort of an NSF grant from Pennsylvania that has used in their classroom. So they delineated the watershed around their school. This is Conestoga Valley High School. You see it in the sort of top center there. So this is their property. They dropped a point, and one of the tools allows you to figure out where that drop of water would go to, the lowest nearest stream, and it delineates the watershed, everything that would flow to that point from upstream and upslope. So first thing you do is you define your study area like this, and then you get all this data. What you're looking at on the left side is the land cover database from USGS. These are the land cover types that are in that study area that you've delineated. You can look at stream data, you can look at the soil data, you can look at terrain data, climate data, point sources of pollution that are permitted within your study area. You can look at animal data that's reported on through county census, and you can look at water quality data also. Then in the site storm model, that 24-hour storm event, you get to make modeling scenarios. You can change land cover, and there's 12 different types of land cover from the USGS that you could make changes to. And there's also conservation practices. Currently, there's 6 different conservation practices that you could propose to implement, like a rain garden or a vegetative basin, or porous paving or a green roof, and or no-till ag. There's lots of different choices there to change land cover. And this is what this teacher did. Jim Hoven is his name. He's a great teacher, one of our kind of champion or master teachers, we call them. And he did this, and his students did this. They all worked in small groups. I think they were working in pairs in his classroom, creating these different scenarios and then running the models. And then you can compare the different scenarios side by side. So by default, you get this predominantly forest, which is just automatically you get this, sort of a control we think of in science. What if the study site was all 100% forest? And then the second one you get is your current conditions before you made any changes. And then here he ran a green campus scenario, which is all those good changes you could make to help the watershed. And you can see very dramatically that this runoff in red went way down, and that's the goal. How can we minimize runoff and increase infiltration? And you can look at that for runoff amounts, and you can also look at it over here for water quality, for suspended solids, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Very quickly, there's the multi-year model also. It's called MapShed. It's a model that's used in Pennsylvania, but used in many other states also. That's the one that I said earlier takes 30 years of data and then gives you this output over here from January through December average output. This one happens to be stream flow, but you can change that to many other things, hydrology and water quality to see. This has a few different types of land cover and conservation practices that you can choose from. This one works better on larger scale study sites. So this is a fairly good size watershed here. This is actually Stroud Water Research Center's watershed. We're about right here. And so this is the east branch of the White Clay Creek, you can tell by looking at it. And you can also change the land cover over here. So land cover and conservation practices. But this one's a little more complex. I'd say this is more of a high school or AP environmental science level. And the one before it, the site storm model, is definitely upper elementary, middle school, and high school. We've had fifth graders involved in the latest NSF funded project, 5th through 12th, and they were using that site storm model and the runoff simulation, the simple simulation. You can compare your results there too. You can see in graphical form from your different scenarios and see what changes you could create. Monitor My Watershed is the 6th tool to show you, and it uses that same GIS platform as Model My Watershed. But what this does after you choose your study area, this is Stroud Water Research Center right here, you can search through all these different databases that scientists use, and USGS uses also, they all contribute their data here, either Quasi or HydroShare or one of these other ones. And I just did a search for water temperature, and this will tell me, out of all these databases, is anybody collecting water temperature within my study site? And then when I find that all these blue dots are water temperature measurements, just, historically, or whoever has chosen to share their data, I can then click on one of these and I can open up and see their data and all the data that they've chosen to make public. So that's a fun tool. If you have your EnviroDIY sensor station, it gets matched up to this too, so you could see your data here. Curricula and NGSS stuff. We currently have 2 different curricula that are available for free, and they are on a partner's website. They're not on Stroud Water Research Center's website. You can get to them through WikiWatershed.org. Just go to the help section of WikiWatershed.org, and then you'll find a link to the curricula. It will take you out to this website, which is hosted by our partner Concord Consortium out of Massachusetts. And they have this innovative technology and science inquiry portal. It has lots and lots of different curricula that they've created over the years, mostly from big NSF projects, and for lots of different science subjects. The 2 that we've created with them, this one is called TES MMW. That's the current grant that's actually has been extended to 2019 that we're still in. This is the one I've been mostly referring to. It has schoolyard investigations, explore your schoolyard with the mapping tool. Here's another schoolyard investigation. Part 4 right here is the simulation, the cartoon-like simulation, and part 5 is walking students through an investigation of their local schoolyard using the full-scale GIS and making different scenarios. This other one here that I dropped on top is another middle school curriculum. It's called Watershed that also uses Model My Watershed. So this is one's under middle school environmental science. This one over here you'll find under high school environmental science. They both have fully detailed teacher guides. 10 more minutes, okay. They both have full scale, teacher guides that have all kinds of resources and additional resources in them, supplemental video activities. We have 12 water scientist career videos that are 1.5 minutes long each, really high quality videos made by a video production company. And it shows people doing water science and STEM careers like that have PhDs, but also people that are just have high school degrees and all different types of STEM careers. And then, of course, alignment to next generation science standards. You can also find information about the current grant project. If you are a member of NSTA, you can go to this journal. This is the high school journal, the Science Teacher. And this is the most recent article to come out about it. This is from 2018. It's called Our Watershed. It's in the February issue of 2018. There's also a slightly older article in Science Scope, which is the middle school NSTA journal. You'll find some information, a different article. And we have a smaller version of the connections to the NGSS standards there, and all the cross-cutting concepts and disciplinary core ideas and all those kinds of things, of course. So let's see. My slides out. I'm getting the spinning wheel of death on my computer now. It's frozen on me for some reason. Let's see, there it went away. Okay. So again, those are the 6 resources. I think I might be doing good on time. The Model My Watershed full-scale GIS modeling tool, Monitor My Watershed, which uses the same platform but gives you the ability to see other data. The Runoff Simulation, which is that cartoon-like simulation of the 24-hour storm event. The Enviro DIY, stream sensor stations, and this community of enthusiasts. The Leaf Pack Network, and the Leaf Pack Kit and all the materials, and then that mobile app called Water Quality. So hopefully some of you have been just playing along on your screen on wikiwatershed.org. Also, in the last 16 minutes, I can jump out and show you some things live, and or I can answer questions. There's been a few questions piling up, I see. So we can go either direction there.
Steve, why don't you take a couple of minutes to show us the tool live a little bit here? We just have a couple of questions and we can probably deal with those in about 5 minutes.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'm going to minimize the, no, I might have to, I think I have to end the slideshow because it's dominating my screens here. And then, are you seeing my son now?
Yes, very cute.
Okay, so here we go. All right, now are you seeing WikiWatershed?
We still have your son.
Yeah.
Okay, you might be on a different screen then. How about if I go to this screen?
Well, it's, yep.
Got it.
All right, great. Sorry, I'm working on 3 screens. So WikiWatershed, here's the platform, wikiwatershed.org. And I think we probably want to launch the app, the Model My Watershed one, the flagship one. And here it is live. I'm going through it. I'm going to allow access. It's going to zoom into my location. Works anywhere in the lower 48 states. Sorry, Alaska and Hawaii, it doesn't work there yet. But we are working on another NSF proposal to add the Alaska and Hawaii data layers. And, so we can do things like, oh, we can add all these blue lines. Here, Delaware, or we'll just use the one. These are zoom dependent. Zoom in or out, and you see these are the streams, which is really cool. You get more detailed as you zoom in or out. We can change all these different views. I like satellite with roads. All right, so I don't think I moved it too much. Yeah, okay, here we go. Here's the Stroud Water Research Center. All right, and you see this is happening live right now. It's as quick as whatever your internet is, because this is all housed on Amazon cloud servers. So you can change all these different base maps. You can enable the National Land Cover Database. Yep, there you go. So those are all the color codes from the USGS about what all those things mean from their latest surveys across the country. You can do the same thing for the hydrologic soil groups, and that's from the USDA. There's all their color codes. You can have elevation color codes, I'd have to zoom farther out to see more detail on that.
Steve, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second here. One of the questions that's been coming up is how much student background knowledge is important for the students to have before they use the tool. And I think you're giving us a good demonstration right now of how much background knowledge they do or don't need. Just popping in there and clicking on the legends to open them up. So
yeah, all this stuff is here. We've built this, I guess, I think one of my roles in this product development, I guess you could call that, has been stopping the scientists at different points in times when they keep wanting to add more and more things, and making them think about the user interface and the usability instead of just adding more and more things all the time.
So do you have suggestions in there about how you work with students on understanding the data piece versus the model piece?
Yeah,
that's very important in NGSS.
There's stuff about that in the teacher guides that are available on that Concord Consortium's ITSE portal. If you're a really technical person and really want to know how does this model actually work, where are these numbers coming from, that's in a technical document. That's back under WikiWatershed here. It's under this technical documentation, which is a really big document that tells you where all this data is coming from.
Sure. A couple other questions that popped up along the way. There was a question about whether there was any historical data available in the tool. So if you want to look back and compare to a storm that happened 2 years ago, can you do that? Or 10 years ago, can you do that?
Not exactly. Not yet. You can create that as a scenario, though, if you know that information. You can create it as a new scenario that you model. Currently, it's whatever the most recent information is that's provided from USGS and other sources. We do have a predictive model that goes into the future. That one's kind of buried, so you sort of have to know where that is. It's a little more technical. But I was just talking the other day with our executive director, we are interested, and we've heard that request. We like that request also, of being able to do kind of change over time. But essentially, every time you create a scenario, you're also doing that. You're doing kind of change over time. So as I've been talking, I just delineated a watershed here, and that's the watershed that surrounds the Stroud Water Research Center. And there are many more small tributaries also, but this is a bigger layer. But let me go out, do this a different way. Zoom way in. And this is to show you a little bit what schools typically do. You zoom way into your property, and let's just say, do a free draw. Let's just say that this is your property boundary. With this, we do manage this field here, and this isn't our property boundary exactly, it's bigger than this, but let's say this is our property boundary. Say that's your school's property boundary. I've just created that as a studies area. I can look at all kinds of data, land cover, all the types that are within that study site, and then I can do some modeling. And if I use that site storm model, that's 24-hour storm event model, here's where I get some of the things I was showing you screenshots of. Runoff and water quality. I can add changes, so I'll quickly do a scenario. I can change land cover. Let's say that this field, let's say it ends up being, let's do a conservation. Let's change it, say it has, instead of traditional farming practice, it gets changed to no-till agriculture. All right, so I just made that change. Let's say also that this is an old mushroom barn. The area in town closest to us, Kennett Square, claims to be the mushroom capital of the world. So there's lots of these mushroom barns around. This is a storage barn for us now. But let's say we put a green roof on top of that. It's going to cost a lot of money and be hard to retrofit, but let's say we did it. We added a green roof there. Let's say we also did things like...
So in using the tools in this way, then you're starting to enable students to look at relationships between variables, right? Because they can
see
exactly changes as a result of that. And what's coming to mind now for me is you've got students who are going in and designing these investigations, looking at modeling things in certain ways. Is there a way for them to export that or save that or share that?
Yes.
Come back to it later?
Yep. So as soon as I clicked model, which I did a couple clicks ago, I'm logged in here. That's a free login. You can either do that directly through WikiWatershed, or you can do that through the ITSE portal, the lessons that are on the Concord Consortium site. And this is lesson 5. You can do it through that platform. Either way, it's free login. As soon as I did it, it created this untitled project that I can share. And I can turn it on to share it. And that's what a lot of students and teachers are doing. They copy this URL, and the students or individual students or pairs or students or groups of students then share that URL with their teacher. And I can just click here, I can launch it too, and there it is again.
Cool.
Project.
One other question just came in. My students are figuring out the August 2014 Detroit flood event phenomenon. I'm thinking the 24-hour storm event tool can help.
Yeah.
How on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Wanda, for that question.
Okay. Yep. Yes. It's not showing my metadata over there for some reason. Let me click a new project and jump to my location. Back here again, I'll show you. Zoom in. What you would do once you created a study site, let me go the whole way back out and start a new one. Since I went into my projects, it's staying on the saved project. I'll just start a new one here. All right, we'll say get started, zoom way in, create, just draw an area study. All right, whatever that may be. Here and analyze the data. I want to do some modeling. I use the storm model. Up here, you can change your storm amount. So if you have a really big storm event, you can make it, that big. So that would be like if a major storm comes through, you can model that scenario. So if a storm came through last night in your local area, and you know that it was a 1-inch rain event in 24 hours, that's actually still a pretty decent sized storm. Or a 2-inch, or if you have leftover remnants of a hurricane that comes up through the Mississippi Valley or across Florida, and just from weather reports how much rain, and you get that from local weather reports came in the last 24 hours, you can model that, and it'll display pretty much what happened in that storm event. And then you can run all your models off of those scenarios. We did this in Houston. Last summer, there was a special request from people that live in Houston, and we showed them how to model that scenario when the hurricane hit the Houston Galveston area. And so we modeled the Houston metro region with the size of the storm that hit within, and the rain within that amount of time. And then we made changes that they knew locally. You use your local information. They knew locally what has changed over time. There's a lot of stream areas that used to be marsh and floodplains, but have been filled in and made into housing developments. So then we went into the scenarios and we changed those back to marsh areas and floodplains, and showed them how much better how much better their situation would have been if they wouldn't have developed those areas in those floodplains. And we can created other scenarios for them also.
Sure.
Walk them through those different scenarios. So yeah, you can run those kind of scenarios.
Excellent.
It really, this specifically what I'm showing you now really hits those NGSS standards of modeling and creating models and comparing models. I showed you the compare tool and some land cover changes also, or in the slides I showed you. Let's just show you real quick here again. If we had these scenarios, then we click compare. you see how, all these different scenarios, and you can compare, create as many as you want, also many different scenarios as you want, and compare.
Really is a big difference from teaching 15 years ago when we had to plot all the topographic maps and look at the streams that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
There's a reference to somebody's fire question. What was the fire question?
So that was Christina. She was talking about the Colorado 13,000 acre wildfire fire that happened last
summer. You can model that.
Opposite of green.
Yep, you can model that because your current scenario, current view at your map will probably show that it's forested area. If you want to, outline the areas the fires were in, and then you can model the scenarios that you can look at fire damage information that you probably can find locally, and you would change that forest land cover type to something else, like what would be most similar?
You go to barren land.
Yeah, it might be barren land. That would, or grassland if it's a few years later, when things are starting to recover. You see, you could change large swaths of area because of fire damage. We have teachers in Colorado that have been doing this. Katie Lund is a teacher in, where is she at in Colorado? She's in the mountains. She's up in elevation too. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what town she's in. Granite Valley or something like that, maybe? In Colorado.
Excellent.
Katie Lund, she's an awesome teacher. And I think it's Garnet Valley High School or something that she might teach at. Don't quote me on that because that's just off the top of my head.
Okay. We had one other plea out there to not only include Hawaii and Alaska, but also to consider some of the territories like Guam and Puerto Rico. So add those to your list in your next proposal.
Yeah.
We have about 1 minute left in our webinar time, so we need to wrap things up. Steve, if I could ask you to pop the slides back up again so that people have access to the post-webinar survey, that would be wonderful.
Yep, we'll do that. And I'll hit play on the slides. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We want to go to the very end of that slide deck, I think the second or third from the end. While you're getting there, we also have a request to learn more about the ITAS project and someone who's wondering if you're on Twitter. So maybe towards the end here, you could pop your Twitter handle into the chat box. That would be wonderful. The link to the post-webinar survey is in the chat box, and we would very much appreciate it if everyone who is on the webinar did complete that post-webinar survey for us. That information is very useful to us as we plan future webinars, and we really do take advantage of your feedback. So please share your feedback with us, clicking on that link in the chat box to that post-webinar survey. And then one final reminder on the next slide that we have a doubleheader coming up in May 9th with USGS, May 23rd with the GLOBE project, and registration information will be sent out later today. So watch your inbox for that registration information. I want to thank my co-sponsors here, Carla McAuliffe, Roback, and thank Monica for working on things behind the scenes, and thank Steve Kerlin very much for your time in introducing us to the WikiWatershed's tool today and to the NGSS curricula that you have developed around it. So we look forward to learning more from you in the future. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great afternoon.